Thank you everyone for joining us for the sixth and final panel in our Immersive Tech Panel Series. My name is Jameson Spivak, and I'm a Senior Policy Analyst with the Future of Privacy Forum, where I lead the organization's work on immersive technologies. Today's panel will be focused on the key issues at the intersection of immersive technologies and youth privacy. Before handing it over to my colleague Bailey to kick off the conversation, I wanted to place this panel in the context of the overall series. Immersive technologies like virtual reality, virtual worlds, and neurotechnologies are changing the way we work, play, learn, take care of our health, and much more. At the same time, privacy legislation is gaining momentum around the US, and regulators have indicated they will use their consumer protection authority to address privacy issues in digital technology industries. It's not always clear how privacy laws would impact immersive technologies differently than other types of technology. But on a deeper level, there are also questions about the new privacy risks that arise when immersive technologies are integrated into domains like health, advertising, and education. As these technologies become part of our everyday lives, it is critical to understand their capabilities, their unique risks, how regulatory proposals might address them, and best practices that organizations can adopt to protect people's privacy. Through a series of panels, we seek to address these emerging questions by asking, what is unique or new about immersive tech? So far, this panel series has explored how immersive technologies can improve how we deliver health and education, conduct advertising, and provide safety and navigation features in vehicles. But we've also looked at how these technologies, without proper safeguards, could threaten privacy by, for example, enabling inferences of sensitive personal information. Nowhere are these issues more critical than how these technologies impact young people who are growing up and their lives are increasingly linked with devices, apps, and an endless stream of data. To dive further into the implications of immersive technologies for kids and teens, I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Bailey Sanchez, Senior Counsel for FPF's Youth and Education team, who will moderate today's discussion.
Thanks, Jameson. So I wanted to start by giving an overview of our panelists and their expertise. So first we have Donna Frazier, who's the Senior Vice President of Privacy Initiatives at BBB National Programs. Ms. Frazier provides a deep understanding of the complexities of privacy issues and the marketplace challenges facing advertisers. And she brings extensive experience in the self-regulation space with a track record of helping companies do the right thing for consumers. In addition to all her other work at BBB National Program, she also overhauled and expanded services provided by the Children's Advertising Review Unit, or KRU, growing membership and nearly doubling participants in the KRU COPPA Safe Harbor program, which is the first FTC-approved Safe Harbor program. We have Elizabeth Milovidov, who's the founder of digitalparentingcoach.com and senior corporate counsel at the Lego Group. So as a lawyer, law professor, and child online protection expert with more than 20 years experience, she has advised government and child protection agencies, nonprofits, and think tanks on public awareness campaigns, research initiatives, and public policy strategies related to digital safety, parenting, and well-being. At the Lego Group, she's a trusted leader in implementing and promoting digital safety, well-being, citizenship in parallel with responsible digital gaming and metaverse experiences. And then we have Dania Tuner. Dania is a privacy policy manager on Meta's youth privacy policy team, where she focuses on supporting young people and helping teams build age-appropriate experiences. Since joining Meta, Ms. Jenner has been leading on product launches and initiatives across the company that aim to center youth privacy. In 2023, she helped lead the launch for parent-managed Meta accounts for MetaQuest, which now allows parents to set up accounts for their preteens and make it easier for parents to manage their family's accounts in VR. So some overview of the conversation we're going to have today. Numerous studies show that Gen Z, more than any other generation, is interested in immersive media and gaming platforms. To reach this audience, companies have expanded their presence in virtual spaces, launching brand experiences, advertisements, and digital products. While immersive worlds in many ways resemble traditional social media and gaming, they do pose some unique risks, particularly related to data privacy and manipulation. Importantly, given the lessons learned over the last few decades with traditional online experiences and the growing interest and awareness, and wanting to create a safe space for kids and teens on the internet, companies are treading cautiously in building those spaces. So today we're going to hear from leaders in this space on considerations and best practices and just how do you do this. I did want to provide some level setting, on terminology and then the framework for how we think about things. So terminology on kids and teens. When we say kids here, we likely mean under 13, though even within that under 13 age group, there can often be reasons to think of preteens as their distinct age group. Generally, though, we will be making distinguishments between kids and teens, given their developmental differences, unique needs, and then differences in how regulatory frameworks may apply to different age groups. I think it's fair to say that my toddler does not interact with immersive technology in the same way as my 13-year-old nephew. And then the framework for just how we think of risk. So I think there's 3 types of risk that we're going to talk about today. There's legal compliance. So a small handful of states have included enhanced protections for teens and their consumer privacy laws, but generally there's just a small state privacy patchwork. And then we have COPPA, which has been around for several decades now, but COPPA applies to under 13s, and it's for services directed to children or with actual knowledge that children are using their sites. We'll get into COPPA more later, but just wanted to flag what COPPA does and does not cover. And then the risk of actual harm is that technology is safe, secure, and private, and then harms can be individual, organizational, or societal. And then the last risk of perception and trust, just regardless of those actual harms or legal compliance, how is this perceived by the community? So with that framework in mind, I did want to kick us off. Before we get into risks and challenges, best practices, and the how, I thought it would be good to spend a few minutes on the why. So this is for all of the panelists. What are benefits of immersive technology to kids and teens? Why is designing immersive technology something that you're all investing time in at your organizations?
Who's going first?
Elizabeth, you unmuted, so I think you're going to go first.
Are you asking us in order? No, happy to go ahead and speak. Sure, I think that in general, not just speaking on behalf of the Lego Group, but I think that we're seeing it in general that there are, huge benefits of immersive technology, and that we've seen that as children are in a playground, that they are in this digital playground. And so it is nice to go and to be with children and teens. It's nice to be with them on their journey as they play, as they learn. And I think that having this sort of increased access, the benefits are there. I know that we're not going to be focusing on the negatives and the risk, but they're also there too, which is why I'm happy that we have lawyers in the room and regulators, supporting and helping out.
Yeah, so I'll add to that and say that I think immersive technologies have such great potential to fundamentally remake teaching and learning, right? And I think some of the statistics that we see all the time kind of point to the why, right? Such as the fact that the percentage of teens with a smartphone has increased from 73% to 95%, I think it is now, right? The average age of the child gets their own device is now 10 years old. And also the increased investment in schools to use emerging and immersive technologies. So it's not just about what kids and teens are doing in their free time, right? As Elizabeth said, they're in this virtual playground, and this engaging in technologies become their norm. This is their normal. And I think some of the basic benefits, for these immersive technologies is to provide this kind of like experiential and hands-on learning, which I think it's got to be much more engaging and memorable than traditional methods. The ability to explore like different places, different cultures. I mean, I'm slightly like jealous of the fact that kids get to use this as a way to learn, right? Perspectives that they're not readily accessible to, and I think it's an exciting it's exciting technology, but of course we have to be mindful of how we implement it with proper guardrails about not just privacy, but also safe interactions.
Donnie, is there anything you wanted to tack on?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Donna and Elizabeth, you guys set us up pretty well here on that exact topic. I think there's so much to explore when it comes to the metaverse and virtual reality. I kind of agree with you, Donna, like to go through school in this way is such a unique opportunity that I think this generation has, which is so exciting. But even in the home, we know that parents are already buying a lot of these headsets, maybe for themselves, but in the end, their teens or their kids might see them using them, and they're kind of like, I want to join in. And parents haven't really had the opportunity to find a way or to feel comfortable yet to let their teens or kids jump in a way that makes sure that they're in the right experience for them. So when we invest or when we look at some ways that we can create those age-appropriate experiences, we're really trying to find ways to allow the family to enjoy this together, give parents an opportunity to better manage maybe their family's experience in this headset or in this like shared device that they might have in the household. So that's really exciting. And then, as Elizabeth and Donna mentioned, we're really excited about the types of other opportunities that live, outside of the home, but really related to building and creating and education and all of these different pieces that we already know families and teens specifically are really excited about and have already started to do. But I do think it's all about making sure that we're creating and providing the right experiences for these age groups and making sure that they know where their bounds are, where their controls and tools are, and then when they can ask their parents or their guardians or a trusted adult for some support.
Yeah, Bailey, I'm just going to add just one more thing as well, because I have to. It's just also the idea, it's the timing is right. We just came out of a pandemic where lots of families, parents were, thrown together with technology, and they learned the hard way. They saw the benefits. They saw how they were able to communicate, multitask, and just do a number of things together side by side. And so it just is kind of the right time to introduce this to that family element, because they've seen the benefits in previous situations. Those with access, right? We'll talk about that later, but those who had access to devices and internet, they were able to just excel.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So, Elizabeth, what do we know and what do we not yet know about how different age groups might be using or finding benefit from immersive technology differently?
Well, for sure. One of the things that I'm definitely seeing is just a lot of the research that's happening in these spaces now. And of course, while it's wildly unethical to try to test babies and put headsets on them to see what the immersive experience would be like, we are seeing studies where, for example, just looking at what children are already doing, what types of technology they're using, and so I think we're very well situated to have a kind of I would say a general roadmap that it's better for older children rather than younger children. And I think we've seen that with technology in general, that there is a sort of, if I may, a child development pattern that transcends to the digital as well, and that we need to be respectful of that. I've seen recently, because I'm here in London, I've seen recently some research that was commissioned by the NSPCC, which is the National Society of Protection Against Cruelty Against Children. It's an old name, but I'm on their Child Safety Online Task Force, and they recently looked at child safeguarding and immersive technologies as well, trying to look at the different age groups to see how they can better equip parents and stakeholders to deal with this. And I think that we have to realize that as we do, just as you said earlier, Bailey, about your toddler and an 18-year-old or a teen, it's the same thing, and we have to respect their age. We have to respect their developmental capabilities. I don't just mean age appropriate, because sometimes, for example, I have a niece who's 18 years old and she has Down syndrome. So when I say developmentally capable, it's not the same thing as another 18-year-old. And I think we have to be respectful of that for the younger children as well as the teens. So I think we're in a really good place. I'm going to be very optimistic about the things that we don't know and what we are learning and how we're going about gathering that information.
Yeah, I think there's some that we don't know, but I think there's a lot of existing literature that we can rely on in the child development space. I think there's also some existing regulatory frameworks that we can rely on. Kids using technology is not new, and we don't have a federal privacy law, but we do have COPPA, which has been on the books for over 20 years. So Donna, I wanted to toss it to you. what do we know? What does COPPA say about how immersive tech might apply with COPPA? Do we have specific guidance? Do we need specific guidance? Does COPPA tell us everything we need to know? Tossing it to you to give an overview.
Okay, sure. So, I mean, we know it's been in effect for over 20 years. And I've said over time that I really do think that the law in and of itself is rather nimble, right? And it can adapt to growing and emerging technologies. And I think we've seen that over the years with regards to the enforcement actions and guidance that the FTC has provided. I would argue that the FTC's COPPA rule requires significant updates in order to provide guidance to industry. And as most of us know, the COPPA rule review began, the current rule review began in 2019. And we are awaiting next steps from the FTC. So for now, we have what we have, right? And as we navigate this terrain between children and teens, I think that the COPPA factors of how to determine whether or not a product is primarily directed to children is really not only helpful guidance for the under 13 space, but also under this new paradigm that we're in, which is what is likely to be accessed by a child. So I have a slide that kind of shows what these factors are that we can put up. And these are certainly not all encompassing, but I think it serves as a starting point when we're trying to make some key determinations and building out products or experiences. So I don't know if we have that slide that we want to put up. I can walk through it. If not, we can go back to it. But I think that there's also, oh, there we go. Thank you. So you'll see, like, these are some of the key factors. And I think if you're looking at them as you're trying to build out product and you know, look, these factors were determined, you know, when we were dealing with just simply websites, but it clearly has moved beyond that. And these factors still apply with the way that we're using technology and building out, you know, different experiences. This is not, again, they're not all encompassing, but I think it's a good place to start the conversation if you're even trying to make determinations about whether or not your product is even likely to be accessed, right? These factors, again, were built when COPPA made determinations about what's child-directed. But now that, again, we're looking at is likely to be accessed by a child. These are the factors that can be helpful in those internal conversations. That aside, you know, there have been a handful of enforcement actions, I think, that apply to the immersive tech space more so than others. The Emoto case, I think, the Emoto Tech case makes it clear to ed tech providers that they cannot require children, of course, or students, to turn over more data than is necessary in order to participate in an online educational activity. But the other thing to be mindful of is that Emoto was also putting the burden of COPPA compliance solely on the schools with little to no information about how they were complying with COPPA. So things to consider when engaging in the tech space or just having your technology used in schools, it may not, that aren't traditionally labeled as ed tech or considered ed tech, you need to, I think, take a look at the Emoto case, really to take a look at what's the burden of even being in that tech, in that educational space, regardless of whether or not you are traditionally labeled as ed tech. Another enforcement action that those should be paying attention to is the Curbo case, or what some people call the Weight Watchers app case. And I know you're wondering, how can the Weight Watchers case apply here? But the main challenge there was the non-neutral age gate, and we can have a whole nother discussion on how you're age gating in the immersive space, which is a whole nother, that may be a whole separate webinar, Bailey. But what we need to pay attention to in that one is the FTC's shift towards algorithmic disgorgement. So the FTC emphasized the necessity of having reasonable data retention policies in place. And here it required that Weight Watchers not only delete any data collected after 1 year, but also required them to delete or destroy any models, or I'm using air quotes, models or algorithms developed using personal information collected from children. This case is indicative of the FTC's shift to use the destruction of algorithms as a remedy, which is something that I think we need to be really, really mindful of, because the use of algorithms is key in a lot of this technology, right? And they apply this in 2 other previous enforcement actions with Cambridge Analytica and the photo app Ever album. So we should pay close attention to that. And also the amended COPPA rule made it clear that third parties going to be held in violation of COPPA, right? Third party liability. And the FTC enforcement actions have made that clear. And I think that they are going to continue to go after what I consider to be low-hanging fruit, right? If you're going to lean on third parties, vendors to provide services for you in order for you to serve this technology, they have got to be in compliance with COPPA. And it's that first party who's responsible for making sure that that happens, but the third party is going to get the first party in trouble every time if they don't get it right. The other thing we should take a look at is that, you know, you mentioned earlier about all the proposed legislation that's in this space, and I think we could argue that COPPA can still be a helpful law in setting the foundation for compliance. Maybe, I say this hesitantly, maybe COPPA is no longer the ceiling, but now closer to the floor. I'm still wrestling with that, but I think still having a federal baseline in the midst of all the state laws is still helpful. The other thing I want to point out is, you know, adjacent to COPPA, we have all of these other state laws. And I think it's important to note that children's data, and again, I'm saying children, right, in the broader scheme of things, with regards to either, in some states it's under 16, under 18, or we're defining it, but that children's data is considered sensitive information. So under Texas, Oregon, Montana, Delaware, Iowa, Tennessee, all but California and Utah include data about a known child in the definition of sensitive information. So I think we need to be really mindful that, again, COPPA can be helpful in getting you to where you need to be in compliance with all these state laws. I think no one's ever going to be happy that COPPA does everything everyone wants it to do. But I still think that it's a useful law, that it does provide a certain agility and can grow with technology. So I'll leave it there. We could pull this line.
Thanks, Donna. And I'm so glad you brought up the Edmodo decision. I think we are more so going to focus on, like, I guess, the entertaining ways to use immersive tech, but having an awareness of how immersive tech can be used in the K-12 setting is definitely worth noting. And the Edmodo decision, I think it's fair to say, was the most significant thing to happen to EdTech this year. And it hasn't gotten a lot of airtime. So Dania, are there any lessons learned in other contexts that Meta has been able to apply to immersive technology? You haven't been around as long as COPPA, but Meta is not a new company, so I assume there are lessons to be learned from other applications.
Yeah, thank you, Bailey. There's a lot that we've been able to take from a lot of our work across our services, which has been really helpful. Of course, taking obviously learnings across the world. When we do a lot of what over the last, I think, 2-3 years while we've been building out our family center experience, I've been really close to that work, and a lot of the work that we've been doing has been around co-designing with teens and parents and experts. And really trying to understand, as you mentioned at the top of this conversation, was teens' unique needs, what parents are looking for, what experts are looking for. And we sometimes invite policymakers and regulators into those conversations as well to understand a little bit more about their expectations in this space. As you mentioned, Donna, like it's ranging. It really depends on who you talk to. It's constantly evolving. So having them in these conversations is really helpful. When we started out the co-design process, a lot of what we focused on was on Instagram and our first suite of supervision tools in that space. But we made sure to sometimes pop in a few questions related to immersive technology, because around the same time we were launching our family center experience for Quest as well, and allowing parents to understand a little bit more about how their teens are already engaging in virtual reality, what the parents expect to learn more about in order to support their teens, how teens can show up responsibly in VR. And so that's been really helpful, taking some of the learnings that we've grabbed from those sessions, really overall within our family center experience, and bringing them into immersive technology and virtual reality where we can, obviously acknowledging that the reason we're having this panel today is because immersive technology does bring unique risks, unique needs, unique opportunities for teens and families to connect and build, but also learn about how to be responsible digital citizens in this space. We'd also be remiss to not acknowledge what other people are doing in this space. So a lot of our industry peers, we're specifically looking at gaming consoles, have been leading the way and have some great solutions around some of the family accounts and parental oversight. And so again, kind of in line with, while we're figuring out some of the regulatory or lawmaker landscape, it's really helpful sometimes to look at what our peers are doing here to understand the expectations and the standards that they've set, so that when we were building Meta's parent-managed Meta accounts for the tween experience, we could understand how are parents already starting to look at or work through some of these like shared gaming consoles. What can we take from that and learn a little bit more about how we can then present that opportunity for parents and teens here, parents and tweens as well, or kids. And then they can learn a little bit more and be not so scared of what's coming at them, but feel like they're already in a familiar space because maybe they looked at Google or Apple or Nintendo for these kind of shared family models that already exist in this space. So taking from a little bit of our Meta products, also learning from the industry, taking in everything that's happening in the policy landscape. There's never enough going on, which means there's never too much to learn from and take into our products as well.
Great, Elizabeth. I wanted to toss to you, what are some of the unanswered questions with kids and teens in immersive tech? I think you've shared a bit, but would invite you to give us some more. And then are these questions for policymakers to answer, areas where more research is needed, or areas where companies should continue to innovate? And then who should have a seat at the table and kind of answering these unanswered questions?
That's a big question. Bailey, you just like wrapped up like 3 questions into one. Let me see, what was the first? You said I've already given you some, right? I'm trying to remember what I said that was so wonderful. But the first part of your question was what?
Unanswered questions. Who should answer these? Do we need more regulation? Okay. Do we need more research? Do we need companies?
Oh, yes.
And then who deserves a seat at the table?
For sure, you can't ask a lawyer if you need more regulation because the answer is always yes. And as an academic, it's like, do we need more research? Of course we do, of course. But I think, in my opinion, and this is again speaking as somebody who's been working with parents in the past 12 years, we need to find ways to provide assurances to parents and to families and to caregivers. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is, instead of just creating, immersive experiences just for the sake of it, we should really be looking at those digital well-being aspects. We should be really looking at ways, the positive aspects of creation, of education, of learning, of connecting, of networking, and looking at all of those things. Again, I'm going to go back to that child development phase, but really trying to provide the right technology at the right time for a child's developing capabilities, so that way they can grow and thrive, because this is the 21st century. And, whether we want to deal with it or not, I mean, things are coming so quickly. And it's literally, if you blink, you missed it. I remember being on vacation last year and ChatGPT came out, and I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And I was so busy trying to look at questions and download before, because I thought it was going to be, shut off forever. And then look at, where we are a year later. And I still don't know if parents have understood that type of technology, what they can do with it. And so I feel like we have to do so much more in education and in guiding them, because we're always talking about our child users, our children, the participation of children, children's voices. What about the parents? What about the families, the close circle that's right there to guide those child users as they're in these immersive experiences? So I think that with respect to the policymakers, I mean, really, we need to get in there and have more of the parent associations, parent organizations, get them a seat at the table to find out, what are their concerns and their fears, so that way we can take care of them. Because I think we really need to take a lot of the fear out of this, and one of the ways to do that is to explain it and to really show them what's happening. I think you had like part A, part B, and part C of those questions, Bailey. So which
I think you covered them all. I think you did.
Okay, good. Because I was going to say, well, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep
talking. Bailey, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Go for it. Come in and help me out, Donna. Thank you.
I don't know if it's going to help. But where do you think that there is the argument for children to have autonomy, right? And that's kind of the laws that's kind of where the age appropriate design codes kind of sit with regards to giving autonomy to children, and there's been talk about, moving away from this level of parental engagement. I think it's different here than it is overseas. The use of parental controls, all that sort of stuff. Would love to hear what you think about that. Sorry, Billy, to hijack.
That question's to Bailey, right? Or is it to me?
Oh, for you.
Oh, for me. Oh my goodness. I did get
And
hijacked.
also, I would just both of you stand on that.
Everybody's going to chime in. So I do agree with you, Donna. This whole idea of parental engagement is and parental involvement. It depends on where you're sitting. It depends on what country you're in. So as you may know, I spent 28 years in France. So I was in Europe, and I'm also an expert of the working group for the European Commission on drafting the European AADC. So we're doing that right now as well. And it's true, the questions that you're bringing up are something that it depends on what country you're in as far as how much parents want to be hands-on. And I also think this idea of autonomy, again, according to the child's capability, developmental capability, not their age, according to their developmental capability. I've seen lots of hands-off countries. I've seen countries that are way too involved. And so the child doesn't have a chance to thrive and to grow. So I hear where you're coming from. I see it, I feel it, and I'm taking a stock of it. And I'm throwing down that hot potato to Danya.
Awesome. Well, we were going to cover this later in the program, but I think I'll just go ahead and segue because the parent and child, and particularly parent and teen dynamic, is perhaps one of the most challenging issue areas in this space, because you kind of have not just one end user in mind, like the actual child or teen. You also have that parent that has a seat at the table. And I think there might be a distinction between parent rights and parent involvement. So Danya, can you talk to us about how Meta has navigated this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad we're talking about it because they're so connected. I think for a long time, or it's very common to see them at odds because it's very easy to think about it in that way. One thing that we've been trying to do, and you all can let us know if we've been doing it well or there's feedback to give, which we're always open to, is how we can make them rather than at odds, but sort of work together. I think, Elizabeth, I'm glad you mentioned the ages and stages and the developmental stages. I think that's a huge part of it. And one of the ways that we've really thought about this is providing sort of controls and tools to parents that support them, but also allow them enough of an opportunity to maybe let go of the reins when they feel like their teen might be ready, but also giving teens an opportunity to demonstrate when they might be ready. So some of the ways that we might do this is maybe for our younger audiences that we recently launched the headsets to for 10 to 12. Parents are fully in control. They create the account, not only for COPPA reasons, of course, around data processing, but also around making sure that we're equipping parents to first support parents, trusted adults, guardians, caretakers to support their kids really as they jump into VR, maybe for the first time ever. And so we're giving parents a little bit more control there. And that, again, is just to be very aware of the fact that this is new technology for many, many people. Education is key, and then parents can be in control here. And parents have asked us to be in control here because they're sort of learning about this as they go. And they want to sort of let go of the reins, not just when they feel like their teen is ready, but also when they feel like they're ready. And they can respond to maybe some more ad hoc requests that the teen might have as they sort of grow up. Or again, as you mentioned, Elizabeth, it might not be about age, but it might be about where they're demonstrating that sort of comfort and readiness. And again, as they move into maybe 14, 15 years old, or again, maybe they demonstrate a little bit more maturity, then we let parents kind of choose that on their own and say, okay, I can give you some more screen time because you've demonstrated that the type of time that you use on VR has been more responsible. You're not doing things that I would find to be not helpful to your day today, let's say. Or, okay, fine, I'll give you access to this app that you've been asking for. It's age appropriate for you. But it's also something that I feel like you might be developmentally ready to to experience in an immersive experience, because maybe they experienced it in 2D and now it makes sense for them to experience immersively. A variety of different pieces there. So that's one way, is really looking at it as how we can bring parents along that journey, but still allow them to be in control when they feel like maybe their teen is just not ready for that. Another piece is also education, which I think I mentioned. We've heard from parents and teens, this is a new space. Teens are often way ahead of their parents, way ahead of the curve in terms of what they know, in terms of how a game works, how an experience might work. And so we really want to bring parents kind of at a level playing field. A lot of that sometimes helps with these older siblings too. So, and helping their younger siblings learn a little bit more, helping their parents learn a little bit more. But as Meta, what we've really tried to focus on is parent guides. Our family center content, a lot of it is really geared at parents to start learning a little bit more, not just about our tools, but even from experts like yourselves on what to think about when you're supporting your teen, both in social media, 2D spaces, but also in immersive spaces. So education is key. Education in context and in the app is also key, again, for the teen to also demonstrate that maybe they're growing and they're ready to maybe take on some more responsibility in the ecosystem. So one way that we do that is, let's say a teen gets a parent might receive a report from their teen. It's so important. We've heard from people like yourself, Bailey, that we provide that report with some context, that report with some education, so that parents aren't alarmed, and they take appropriate action that they, again, feel is right for them. And I think that speaks a lot to, again, how the teen can demonstrate their own growth and their own responsibility in the experience, but also recognize when they need help. And again, that varies for every family. So I think what we're really trying to do is provide that sort of the tools that parents and teens can have, parents and kids can have, to start having the conversations and evolve. And then lastly, we work really, really closely with experts, again, like yourself, Bailey, and like everyone on this panel, to help us reconcile that sort of desire for a teen to want to go off and do what they want, and then the parents' real need and desire to want to know what their teen is doing, what their kid is doing, to support them. Maybe it's not to necessarily control them, but sometimes it's just to understand, start that conversation. And we don't have all the answers, so that's why we come to you all, and we're so grateful that experts have like lent their time to us to really allow us to explore that. I think, like Bailey, you and I have probably had conversations about this in the age assurance space, in our parental supervision space, for hours on end around how can we really make sure that we're supporting parents and teens together, and not making them feel like they're at odds with one another, but more so supporting them. That was a bit of a ramble, but I don't know, John, if that's helpful as well, Bailey, if that's helpful, and I can pass it to Elizabeth. Yeah.
No, I just have to come back in because it's super interesting. Both of you make me go like this and then like that. So Donna, with your initial question, I'm just like, of course, we want children to have autonomy. We want, but we also want parents to step into their digital guardianship. Then as I listen to you, Dania, I'm just like, yeah, but we don't want them to have that much autonomy, and we need parents to be there. And how can they possibly get the right resources to understand? So I think that this just shows the conundrum that we're truly in. And even with all your great resources in the Family Center and other places, parents don't go there. They don't get that information. So therein lies the rub.
Elizabeth, I think you're teeing up my follow-up question for you. So we are talking mostly to an audience of lawyers and policy folks. What do you want them to know about communicating to parents or designing tools that are accessible for parents?
Yeah, just please don't forget the parents. Don't forget the caregivers, the guardians in this relationship. I started consulting 12 years ago. You would always have government there. You would have public policy, industry. Occasionally you would have schools. Sometimes you would have the kids themselves, at these conferences, and the parents were never there. So please, policymakers, lawyers, draft things to really support your biggest allies, which are parents, because of course they fundamentally want what is the best for their children, what's going to help them thrive. And if you give them the tools that will help them do that, then it's a win-win. I would also say, remember yourself, if you're a parent, how busy you are. Stop with the 30 pages of documents and things. Nobody has time. We do not have time to read that. I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. I can barely see emojis right now. but start doing focus groups to figure out what resonates with those parents, and then, you know, help it spread. If young people can create viral content online, why can we not figure out something that will go viral for parents? I've never understood that. There has to be a way. And I also think that for policymakers, that sometimes taking that fear out of technology and reminding parents again of these traditional roles, and this is without going old school, but just reminding them that as they had a baby and they were trying to decide, you know, what's the baby's first food, and they would ask community, they would ask elders or people who know, that they can do the same thing with immersive technology. And that's today. Tomorrow it's going to be something else. And if they don't ask, if they don't know that they can ask, they're not going to get the answers.
Great.
Donna, you look like you have something to say. Donna has something to say. I can tell. She was nodding. Oh, no. Donna, help me out. Help me out.
I'm in agreement with you.
Donna, so as we know, child privacy and safety is a really important issue to parents and lawmakers. I think there are some concerns that immersive technology presents a heightened risk to children, maybe more so than other technologies. And we just talked about how parents are very busy and they might not be familiar with this technology themselves. What are some green flags to look for with compliance or responsibly using data, or ways to identify good actors in this space?
So I think the first thing to look at is really, how is a company demonstrating its compliance, right? Are they working with an independent third-party assessor, you know, or another entity? I'm not sure it's always the best thing for a company to solely self-attest its own compliance and to operate in, you know, a very narrow bubble. So I think the first thing is, you know, is this company working with other trusted entities on demonstrating that they're a good actor, right? And let's talk about what a good actor is, right? It's not just about providing great content, right? It's everything we're talking about, which is, how are you informing your users? How are you making it easy for them to not just understand what you're doing, but also connect the dots for them, why you're doing it, right? We talk about like doing just-in-time disclosures and things like that. I think what we find with a lot of users is that, you know, privacy policies are these long documents that no one reads. And, you know, I write them and I don't take offense and no one reads them. It's okay. But we need to find a way to, I think, as you're actually engaging in an activity and there's some sort of, if it's, whether it's data that's being collected, whether it's something else, tell me what's happening, the simplest language possible in that moment, so that I can connect the dots, right? Because when you put everything in a privacy policy, it's in this fixed state, and you can't always apply it to the actual action until you actually are in that action, and sometimes it's too late. So I think one of the things we look at is, how are you demonstrating this, right? Is it easy for users, for teams to get support, to ask questions? You know, those are all the types of things that I think make good actors in this space. Those are the green flags we're taking a look at. You know, I think that there are so many different ways for companies to get creative, right? This is a really creative space. So we don't have to adhere to the old paradigms of how you make disclosures, how you inform, how you engage. You can use the actual technology to create other ways to educate and inform. So I would encourage developers to do that.
Great. So when we think about kids and teens and technology, I think it's really hard to untangle privacy from safety. And I think both are important conversations. So Danya, can you tell us a bit more about privacy by design and what that has looked like with your work at Meta?
Yeah, definitely. So within Meta, we have this privacy review process, and it's pretty well known now across the company that we've built out over the last few years, and then some. And when we started to really consider youth as something that is going to enhance that privacy review process, we really brought it into that experience. So product teams now over the last few years have started to come to like privacy review office hours, for example, or privacy review teams where they come in, they ask questions, and they understand a little bit more about like some of these baseline requirements that we're seeing, not just in legislation, but expectations from that we're seeing in research. So like what are we getting from feedback from academia? What are we getting feedback from experts that we can then feed into them that we luckily have that connection to? So they'll come to us whenever they have a product or feature that might focus on youth, that might target youth, that might have some open questions around youth. And really, they just kind of know who we are, come to us. Sometimes it's also ad hoc because they don't know if they should come, and we tell them, just come just in case. There's always something that we could probably tell you that you might not have known. We also explain a little bit about, some of the recent safeguards that we've launched and how they might relate to the work that they're doing. And so I think that's been really, really helpful to think about privacy by design. And we can share with them a little bit more, to your point, Donna, about how we work on our youth privacy practices. So what are our data minimization principles? How do we think about transparency in education when it comes to teens and parents and young people and kids? What is our approach to age-appropriate ad experiences? How are people considering all of that? So they'll come to us, we'll provide that with them, and then we usually go through a process where we would have to sign off on a feature, on a product, or some sort of initiative, and it usually goes through multiple rounds of review. I am not the product team's favorite person, which is fine, which is something that I've come to accept. Although it's really, really great when a product person gives you a shout out and you're like, that's great. I'm glad I helped you out there. So that's been really helpful. A big part of that though, so a lot of what we do in that process, really looking at data minimization, data collection, a lot of the data, very like hardcore privacy pieces. With youth, the unique and what's exciting about it as well, when we've talked a little about this, is we also bring in our safety policy partners into those conversations sometimes, because it is so connected. So something that might have a very strong youth privacy component most often also has a very strong youth safety or youth well-being or youth whatever it might be component to it. So even if they might not sit in that privacy review office hours, either we'll invite them to sit in on a session if we look at the agenda, or we'll bring it to our cross-functional sort of working groups that we have within the company that really talk about youth safety, youth privacy, youth well-being, and we all come together. And it's really, really, really helpful to do that kind of all together. So it's privacy by design, but also safety as an enhancement always, and well-being. They're also connected and not always at odds, which is something that's been really nice to find out over the last few years.
And then Elizabeth, you're a bit more on the safety by design side of things. So can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you and at the Lego Group?
Yeah, so it's super exciting. So I know that people, they hear safety by design, privacy by design, and their eyes glaze over. I'm looking at Donna. But what's really exciting though is if we just take the terminology out of it and really just remember that we're trying to focus on the user experience, right? And so one of the things that we did at the Lego Group in 2020 was with UNICEF. We sat there and we just basically asked two questions. What does well-being mean for children, and how can digital experiences be designed to enhance their well-being? So by looking at this and having, doing the focus groups and academic researchers from Australia, from the UK, from the US, really meeting children where they were playing, trying to understand, what was making them happy. We were able to come up with, it's called RightTech, the project, which is Responsible Innovation for Technology with Children. I always mess up the acronym every single time. But the whole idea with RightTech is that they came up with 8 principles. And, these are the things that if you insert this into your digital experience, then we're kind of creating well-being by design, which obviously has a flip side of safety by design. And so some of the things that we were looking at was, being able to design to create to boost a child's competence, or to help them with self-regulation, or obviously diversity, equity, inclusion, and obviously safety and security. Things like creativity, emotional regulation. My goodness, that's like the biggest one I'm always thinking about is, making sure that kids are able to put the device down, step away when they have to, not blow up a chat because someone, took their weapons and whatnot. Empowerment, and of course, social connection. So it's all of these positive aspects that they actually did, like I said, performed real research with real children to get these results. And now they are testing it. And so at the Lego Group, we are also testing it, placing it in our digital games and experiences just to see. And yes, you're going to say, but Elizabeth, how do you really tell if you boosted a child's well-being from the moment they started playing the game to afterwards? And I will say we're working on all of these things and looking at it, because really that's the end of the game, is to be able to find and say that we have this method, and then to share that as a best practice with other industry players, hopefully for them to build onto it, adapt it, make it better, use it for all sorts of different types of technology. And there you go, well-being by design.
I feel like there is a narrative that safety and privacy are often at odds with each other, but the way that you each answered, it sounds like they work hand in hand, just to have like a good experience for kids and teens. Donna, I did want to invite you to talk about TAP, which addresses both privacy and safety harms to teens.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I think they both kind of teed up. It's a nice segue into this. So we could pull up the slides, and TAP is our teenage privacy program. And really what we did was, over 2 years ago, before California had legislated their age appropriate design code, we started having these conversations about the teen space, because I felt like no one was really paying close attention to this. And we knew it was coming, right? We knew that there were conversations very prevalent about either raising the age of COPPA, or at least trying to address this 13 to 17 space, which is how we define teens when we were designing the roadmap. And what we did was we created these different signposts with regards to the collection of teen data, the use and retention of teen data, and the sharing of teen data. And what we did was, there are all these conversations happening amongst legislators, both here and abroad, about all of the harms. And that's a very weighty conversation, right? And you can get stuck in the weeds on all the harms. But what we decided to do was, okay, we hear you. We're going to take a look at all the harms. And now let's work our way backwards. How do you avoid those harms in implementation, in design? So this roadmap is really intended to be a tool for companies as they are developing product to have those conversations. We can go to the next slide. So you'll see here that the way that it works is, if you look at the far left, right, when designing a business practice that involves collection, sharing of precise geolocation information, ask yourself these questions, right? And then consider these practices to avoid these risks and harms. So it helps developers, lawyers, marketing, everyone who's involved in the development of a product or an experience to really have this robust conversation, right? We all want to avoid the risks and the harms. How do you do it? So we created this roadmap, right, to essentially address this specifically. So here, the harms here are unnecessary collection of personal information, and there are potential safety harms as well. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that there are different risks and harms that we identify. Cyberbullying, image abuse, self-harm, all of these things can result from just user-generated content. Not saying you shouldn't do it, not saying that you can't do it. You can, but these are the practices that you should consider, right? So ask yourself these questions. So we really, I think, worked really hard to create something that, again, could be a tool that companies can have those conversations. And also, I think, hopefully encourage creative development, creative solution and design, but also engage everyone in a company who's involved in doing the design. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see some additional harms in developing practices, right? So if you're trying to use algorithms, which we talked about earlier, to curate content, algorithms are not going away. Let's just understand, they're not going away, right? They're integral in design, especially in immersive technologies, but they can create addictive behavior. They can create self-harm. So how do we avoid those? So we are updating this roadmap because, as I mentioned, we did this before California. I think it's pretty aligned with the UK's age appropriate design code and California's age appropriate design code. but so much has happened in the last year and a half that it's necessary for us to continue to update this. I think it's a living, breathing document, but you know, we provide this to companies, we offer guidance, we help them work through these solutions, we look at what they're doing from design, but I think what this roadmap does is outline and it brings together these two things we've talked about, right? Privacy and safety. Because
Donna, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Can I ask?
Sure.
So just with your, because I think this is fabulous and this whole, the idea of self-regulation. So what is a characteristic of a company that does well with this self-regulation?
Right. So I think a company does well is first, it's that desire to engage, right? To understand that I think self-regulation can work outside. Here's the law, self-regulation is here, right? We're taking the laws, but we can build on that. And I think we can be more future thinking, we can be more forward thinking, we can be more creative. We are not bound to the boundaries of just the law, right? Our desire is to really help industry grow and build and develop in a way that, yes, it's cognizant of the laws, but you don't have to be bound by them and we feel restricted, right? We want to encourage design development and all sort of stuff. Yes, we're going to make sure that you're compliant with the laws. But again, as I said earlier, let's be creative about this. And let's figure out ways that we can really work to do this. But as a self-regulator, we're monitoring what you do, right? We're ensuring that you're adhering to the promises and commitments that you've made. So whether it's having one of our seals on your website or a mobile app or whatever it is, we're ensuring we're holding you accountable to your promises, right? And that's where self-regulation, I think, you know, goes a step further, obviously, than the laws, right? The FTC can bring enforcement actions for the bad actors. We want to ensure that there are good actors in the space and that they're upholding their commitments.
Okay, we have just a couple minutes left. I did want to end by talking about designing inclusive spaces. So I will try and reserve like a minute for everyone to give their last thought here. So Dania, to you, Meta sits in a unique role in that you're both building the hardware for VR and also designing games and experiences. How have you thought about inclusion in developing these products?
Thanks for the question. I'm glad we kind of have an opportunity to talk about this. I know we're limited on time, so I'll try and keep it very quick. There's a couple different ways in which we think about inclusion. There's obviously the very obvious like access to the experiences and access to the headset in the first place. And so one of the things that we've done over the past few years is we've obviously lowered the cost of it. That's still not to say that makes it accessible. I think that's very important to recognize. But one thing we are exploring is for families who might not have that opportunity to engage with it as a household device, how can we maybe bring it into the classroom or work with administrators within educational spaces so that more communities can probably have access to it, or community centers. And that might be one lever. And so we've been exploring that over the last few years. I know I've started to get directly involved in some of those initiatives for the next few years. So I'm really excited about that. We're starting to do some research on what kinds of educational programs might need it most, what kind of communities might actually are most excited. A lot of communities are. And so we're hoping to partner with administrators, learn a little bit more from educators. Also, like if we bring it into the classroom, how can we actually support them while they manage that type of experience? And then making sure that it becomes accessible to more and more folks. So there's that piece of inclusivity. There's also the piece around accessibility while using a lot of the headsets themselves, and then engaging experiences. So we've made a lot of modifications to our audio and visual features that we have to support folks that might need that kind of additional level of support. We talked a lot about developmental stages, so want to be very mindful that sometimes it's not just the fact that kids might need some extra support, anyone might need some extra support. So trying to explore how we can provide tools and controls for those kinds of experiences. In Horizon World specifically, that's like one place where we've been able to sort of test some of our own features and maybe learn a little bit more about how we can grow and improve them. One is personal boundary. We really do emphasize that immersive spaces are new. It can be very overwhelming. It can be a strong sense of sensory overload for anyone, really. And so we really prioritize showing and demonstrating the value of personal boundary and how you can control that experience a little bit more, which allows some sort of separation between you and anyone else around you. You can make it so that there's some separation between just you and someone that you might not know. You can do it with friends, you can do it with everyone. And so that hopefully gives you some sense of space, comfort as it relates to space. And then we also have different options for you to be using the headset sitting down, standing up, adjust different levels of usage in that way. So yeah, as I mentioned, there's the access in terms of access to the experience, but then there's also the inclusivity element of when you're using it. And then I'd be remiss to not mention our avatars. There is so much work. I actually sit right next to the person who works on our avatar work, and she comes into a lot of our conversations related to youth identity, parents, and how we can evolve the way that you express yourself in the metaverse. It is super exciting. I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about when we talk about the metaverse and how you can express yourself, and really providing that sort of creative layer, but also supporting people to sometimes maybe not take avatars so seriously as necessarily being who you are. Maybe you have a lot of different avatars because one day you want to wear pink and another day you want to wear polka dots. And so really excited to see the future of that. But that's another lever, obviously, that we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. We've expanded the types of styles, the length of your hair, the color of your skin, obviously, how you appear is just really important. And I love talking to my colleague about it almost every day. I wish I could talk about it more. I'll pause there, but as I mentioned, there's so many layers to accessibility and DEI that we really want to make sure we're focusing on.
Awesome. I feel like I haven't played around with the avatar features nearly as much. So we are over time. I want to thank the panelists and attendees for your participation, but this is a recording that we're going to post. So I wanted to give Elizabeth, you will get the last word if you have 60 seconds that you want to tag on into designing inclusive spaces, because the recording will live on forever, even though we're past time.
Yes, and I'm going to only take 30 seconds because I want to give the other 30 seconds to Donna. We still have to do better. Because when we're creating these spaces and it's just a small set of people, that we're not designing for the entire world, and we have to do better for access, inclusion, and equity, period. Donna, your 30 seconds, I'm sharing with you.
No, thank you. What I would love to see is that we use this technology to really help create good digital citizens, right? That's what we're doing, right? That we're allowing users, kids, teens to really actually become better people, both offline and online. And I would love to see the expansion of the use of technology that way.
Great. I think that was a great note to end it on. So thanks again, everyone. Like I said, the recording will be, I believe, on LinkedIn and also on the FPF website. But thanks for participating.